The last city on Earth was dying. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the tall windows of Fortress Alpha and watched the alien ships fill the sky like black clouds. Their weapons shot bright beams of light that cut through buildings like hot knives, through butter. Each blast shook the ground beneath his feet. "Sir, the outer wall is gone," Captain Ryan Torres said from behind him. His voice was calm, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. Ryan had been with him for 5 years, through 3 different battles against the Velthran Empire. This one would be their last. Jake turned away from the window. The command center buzzed with activity as his officers tried to coordinate a defense that everyone knew was hopeless. On the main screen, red dots showed where the alien ground forces were breaking through their lines. There were too many to count. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 2 hours before they reach the inner city," Lieutenant Pete Williams answered. He was young, barely 25, and this was his first real battle. His hands shook as he worked at his control panel. Dr. Lisa Bennett looked up from her corner workstation. She was not a soldier. She was an archaeologist who had been studying the old ruins beneath the city. Jake had never understood why she insisted on staying here instead of evacuating with the other civilians. "Admiral, I need to show you something," she said. Her dark hair was messy, and her clothes were wrinkled from working all night. "The chambers I found under the city, there's something down there, something important." Jake wanted to tell her that ancient ruins didn't matter when alien plasma cannons were turning his city into ash. But Lisa had been right about things before. She had predicted that the Velthran would attack Earth directly instead of trying to starve them out with a blockade. "What kind of something?" he asked. Lisa pulled up images on her tablet. The pictures showed stone corridors covered with strange symbols that seemed to glow in the dark. Crystal formations hung from the ceiling like frozen lightning. Everything looked old. Very old. "These tunnels go down for miles," she said. "The symbols tell a story. I've been trying to translate them for weeks. They talk about guardians, about a promise made long ago." Another explosion rocked the fortress. The lights flickered and dust fell from the ceiling. On the tactical display, more red dots appeared as Velthran dropships landed in the city's outer districts. "Dr. Bennett, with respect, we don't have time for ancient history," Captain Torres said. "The aliens will be here soon. We need to focus on evacuation or surrender." "We can't evacuate," Jake said quietly. "The transport ships were destroyed in the first wave, and surrender means execution. The Velthran don't take prisoners." Everyone in the room knew this. The aliens had made their position clear when they conquered the colony on Mars 2 years ago. They killed every human they found. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. The Velthran saw humanity as a disease that needed to be wiped out. Lisa stepped closer to Jake. The symbols mentioned something called the Old Compact, a deal made between Earth and something else, something that's been sleeping until the final hour. "Sleeping what?" Jake asked. "I don't know yet. But there are power readings coming from those chambers that don't match anything in our technology. Professor Dan Carter's down there now with Dr. Amy Rodriguez. They're trying to understand what we're dealing with." The main screen flashed red as another section of the city's defenses went offline. The Velthran were using their bioweapons now. Jake could see the massive insect-like creatures crawling through the streets on 6 legs, each one the size of a bus. Plasma cannons grew from their backs like tumors. Human soldiers shot at them with everything they had, but their weapons barely left scratches on the aliens' armor. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Velthran command ship," Communications Officer Linda Hayes reported. "Put it through," Jake said. The screen changed to show a creature that belonged in nightmares. The prime subjugator stood 12 feet tall on 4 legs that ended in claws. Its face was a mix of insect and reptile, with compound eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors. When it spoke, its voice was like metal scraping against stone. "Humans of the 3rd planet," it said. "Your resistance is pointless. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot protect you. We offer you one final chance. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." Jake stepped forward. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. Go to hell." The alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Your species' arrogance is amusing. We have conquered 17 worlds. We have destroyed civilizations that were ancient when your kind first learned to make fire. You are nothing. In 1 solar hour, we will begin the final assault. When it is finished, humanity will exist only in our archives as a cautionary tale. The transmission ended. The command center was quiet except for the distant sound of explosions and the hum of computer systems. 1 hour. Pete Williams whispered. Jake looked around at his people. These men and women had followed him through impossible odds before. They had held the line when the Valthrin took the Jupiter colonies. They had fought a delaying action on Luna that saved thousands of civilian lives. Now they were trapped on Earth with nowhere left to run. Lisa, he said, these chambers under the city. You think there's something down there that can help us? She nodded quickly. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's down there has been dormant for a very long time, but it's still active. The symbols suggest it's been waiting for something. A signal or a trigger. What kind of trigger? I'm not sure, but Dan and Amy are working on it. They think the symbols might be instructions, a way to wake up whatever's sleeping down there. Jake made his decision. It wasn't really a choice. When you're facing extinction, you try anything that might work. Do it, he said. Activate whatever you found. We've got nothing left to lose. Lisa smiled for the first time since the attack began. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll contact the team right away. As she spoke into her communicator, Jake turned back to the window. The alien ships were moving into position for their final attack. Bright lights flickered along their hulls as they charged their main weapons. In an hour, those weapons would turn New Geneva into a crater. But maybe, just maybe, humanity had one last card to play. Something that had been waiting in the dark, beneath their feet for thousands of years. Something that remembered promises made in the distant past. Jake didn't believe in miracles. He was a military man who dealt in facts and tactics and hard choices. But as he watched the enemy ships prepare to end his species forever, he found himself hoping that Dr. Bennett was right, that somewhere in the ancient tunnels below, something was stirring, something that might remember what it meant to protect the Earth. The countdown to humanity's final hour had begun. But in the depths below, older powers were beginning to wake. Dr. Lisa Bennett ran through the underground tunnels as fast as she could. The stone walls around her were covered with symbols that glowed brighter with each passing minute. Behind her, she could hear the explosions from the battle above getting louder. The Valthrin were breaking through the city's defenses faster than anyone had expected. She reached the main chamber where Professor Dan Carter and Dr. Amy Rodriguez were working. The room was huge, bigger than a football field, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. Crystals the size of cars hung from metal chains that looked like they were made from some kind of silver metal that never got dirty or old. Lisa, thank God you're here, Dan said without looking up from the wall he was studying. He was a thin man with gray hair who had spent his whole life studying ancient languages. Right now he looked like he had seen something that scared him, very much. What did you find? Lisa asked. Amy looked up from her instruments. She was younger than the other two, a quantum physicist who usually worked with numbers and equations instead of old stones and crystals. Her face was pale in the strange light that came from the walls. The energy readings are incredible, Amy said. Whatever's powering this place has been running for thousands of years without stopping. The power source is completely unknown to our science. Dan pointed to a section of the wall where the symbols seemed to move and change when you looked at them directly. I've been working on these markings all night. They're not just writing, Lisa, there's something else. Something that changes based on who's reading them. What do you mean? Lisa asked. Watch this, Dan said. He placed his hand on one of the symbols. The moment his skin touched the stone, the entire wall lit up like a computer screen. New symbols appeared, forming words in perfect English. The children of the far stars have returned to the third world, Dan read aloud. They flee the same darkness that once drove them from the void between galaxies. The compact remains. The guardians sleep until the final hour when the children call for protection. Lisa felt her heart beating faster. Children of the far stars. That's us, isn't it? Humans. Keep reading, Amy said. Dan moved his hand to another symbol. More words appeared. Long ago, when the children first came to the third world, they were few and weak. The hunters of worlds followed them across the black sea of space. The guardians of the third world made an offer: protection in exchange for remembrance. Stories, told around fires, songs sung to children, honor given through generations. The hunters of worlds, Lisa whispered. The Velthrin Empire. The ground shook as another explosion rocked the fortress above them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and some of the smaller crystals chimed like bells. Amy checked her tablet. Admiral, Morrison is trying to contact us. The aliens have broken through the secondary defenses. He wants to know if we found anything useful. Lisa grabbed the communication device. Admiral, this is Bennett. We're making progress. Give us more time. Time is what we don't have. Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. The Velthrin commander just announced they're starting their final attack early. We've got maybe 30 minutes before they reach the inner city. 30 minutes, Dan said after Lisa ended the call. We need to work faster. He moved along the wall, touching different symbols. Each one revealed more of the story. The ancient texts told of beings that had lived on Earth long before humans arrived. Not aliens like the Velthrin, but something else. Something that was part of the planet itself. These guardians, Lisa said as she read over Dan's shoulder, they're not human. No, Dan agreed. But they're not exactly aliens either. Listen to this part. He touched a new symbol and read the words that appeared. The guardians are the dreams of the world made real. They are the stories that live in the hearts of the children. As long as the children remember, the guardians remain. As long as the children believe, the guardians can act. Amy's instruments suddenly went crazy. All the screens lit up at once, showing energy readings that shouldn't have been possible. Something's happening, she said. The power levels are spiking everywhere. The crystals in the chamber began to hum. It was a low sound that you felt in your bones more than heard with your ears. The symbols on the walls pulsed brighter, and new passages appeared in the stone where there had been solid rock before. The chamber is changing, Lisa said. It's responding to us. Dan was reading as fast as he could. The activation sequence, he said. I think I found it. The guardians need to be awakened, but it requires something specific. What? Amy asked. Belief, Dan said. True belief. The text says the guardians draw their power from the faith of the children, from stories and myths and legends. The more people believe in them, the stronger they become. Lisa understood. That's why they've been sleeping. As humanity became more scientific, more logical, people stopped believing in the old stories. The guardians got weaker until they had to sleep. But they're still here, Amy said. Waiting. The communication device crackled again. Dr. Bennett, this is Captain Torres. The aliens are in the city streets. We can see their ground forces from the fortress windows. You need to hurry. Lisa looked at her two friends. We have to try it. Whatever it takes to wake them up. Dan nodded. The text mentions specific names, old names from human mythology, gods and heroes from every culture on Earth. Norse, Greek, Egyptian, Aztec, Celtic, they're all connected somehow. How do we wake them? Amy asked. Dan studied the symbols carefully. We speak their names. We tell their stories. We remember what they meant to our ancestors. But we don't have time to research every mythology on Earth, Lisa said. We don't need to, Dan said with excitement in his voice. Look at this. He touched a final symbol and the entire chamber filled with light. Images appeared in the air around them, showing battles from human history. Warriors with hammers that called down lightning. Heroes who fought monsters with swords of fire. Wise figures who commanded the winds and seas. These aren't just stories, Dan said. They're records. The Guardians were there all along, helping humanity survive. Every myth, every legend, every tale of gods walking among mortals. It all really happened. The crystals hummed louder. The stone floor beneath their feet began to warm up. Amy's instruments showed energy building up all across the planet. centered on ancient sites that humans had always considered special. "The network is activating," Amy said. "Stonehenge, the pyramids, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, every major archaeological site on Earth is lighting up with the same energy signature we're seeing here." Above them, the battle was getting closer. They could hear human weapons firing in the streets near the fortress. The Velthran bio-creatures were almost at their door. "Now or never," Lisa said. "Dan, start reading the names. Amy, monitor the energy levels. I'll contact Admiral Morrison and tell him what's happening." Dan began to speak the ancient names written on the walls. As each name left his lips, the crystals glowed brighter. The symbols pulsed with power that had been building. For thousands of years, Thor, Odin, Zeus, Ra, Quetzalcoatl, Shiva, Amaterasu. With each name, the energy in the chamber grew stronger. The air itself seemed to thicken with potential. Something vast and ancient was stirring in the depths of the earth. The Guardians were waking up, and they remembered their promise to protect the children of the stars. Outside, the final battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. But this time, humanity would not fight alone. The first sign that something had changed came from space. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Turner was monitoring the Velthran fleet from the Fortress Communications Center when every screen in the room went white with interference. "What's happening?" Admiral Morrison asked as he rushed into the room. "Energy signatures, sir," Alex said, trying to make sense of the readings. "Massive ones. They're coming from all over the planet. Every ancient site is lighting up like a star." On the main display, red dots marked locations across Earth's surface. Stonehenge in England blazed with light that could be seen from orbit. The Great Pyramid in Egypt shot a beam of golden energy straight up into the sky. In Peru, Machu Picchu pulsed with power that made the nearby mountains glow. "The aliens are seeing this too," Captain Torres reported from his station. "Their ships are pulling back from the planet. They seem confused." Jake Morrison had been a soldier for 25 years. He had seen plasma weapons that could melt steel and energy shields that could stop tank shells. But he had never seen anything like what was happening now. The first figure appeared above the ruins of ancient Olympia in Greece. It started as a point of golden light that grew bigger and bigger until it took the shape of a man. But not an ordinary man. This figure stood 30 feet tall, with muscles that seemed carved from marble, and eyes that burned like small suns. In his right hand, he held a spear that looked like it was made from lightning itself. When he spoke, his voice reached every human on Earth at the same time, speaking in their own language. "The compact is honored. The children call, and we answer." Jake stared at the tactical display as more figures began to appear around the world. In the frozen lands of Norway, a massive warrior emerged from the ancient stones. He carried a hammer that sparked with electricity and wore armor that gleamed like silver. Thunder rolled across the sky when he moved. "Is that really—" "Captain," Torres began. "Thor," Jake finished. He had read the old stories as a child. But seeing the god of thunder standing 40 feet tall in the real world was different from reading about him in books. More beings appeared every minute. From the deserts of Egypt came figures with the heads of animals and eyes like fire. They moved through the air without wings, leaving trails of golden sand behind them. In the jungles of Central America, feathered serpents as long as buildings rose from pyramid temples, their scales shining with every color imaginable. The Velthran Prime Subjugator had been confident just minutes before. Now, its voice carried confusion and something that might have been fear when it broadcast to its fleet. "What are these creatures? Where did they come from?" Jake almost felt sorry for the alien commander. The Velthran Empire had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced anything like this. How do you fight beings that exist halfway between dream and reality? "Sir, the aliens are trying to attack the manifestations," Sergeant Nicole Price reported from the ground forces. "Their weapons aren't working." On the screen, Jake watched Velthran plasma beams cut through the air toward the figure in Greece. The Golden Warrior didn't even move to dodge. The energy blasts passed through him like light through water, not causing any damage at all. Then the god raised his spear and threw it. The weapon moved too fast to follow with human eyes. One moment it was in the giant's hand, the next it was punching through the hull of a Velthran battleship 3 miles above the surface. The alien vessel exploded in a ball of fire that lit up half the sky. "Holy shit," someone whispered in the communications center. Similar attacks were happening all over the planet. In Scandinavia, the thunder god swung his massive hammer. Lightning struck down from a clear sky, wrapping around an entire squadron of alien fighters and crushing them like tin cans. The pilots never had time to scream. From the oceans near Easter Island, beings made of living water rose up. They looked like people, but their bodies flowed like waves. When they reached toward the Velthran ships hovering over the Pacific, water spouts a mile high grabbed the vessels and dragged them down beneath the surface. The alien ground forces were having just as much trouble. The massive insect creatures that had been tearing through human defenses like paper now faced opponents they couldn't understand or hurt. In the streets of New Geneva, a Velthran biotank fired its plasma cannon at a figure that had appeared from nowhere. The being looked like a woman, but she was 12 feet tall with skin that seemed to be made from starlight. Her hair moved like it was underwater, and when she walked, flowers grew from the concrete beneath her feet. The plasma beam hit her directly, in the chest. She didn't even slow down. Instead, she reached out with one hand and touched the alien creature's carapace. The biotank stopped moving immediately. Its armor began to crack and split as plants grew from inside it. Vines and flowers burst through every gap, turning the weapon of war into a garden in seconds. "Dr. Bennett, are you seeing this?" Jake called down to the underground team. Lisa's voice came through the communicator, excited and breathless. "Admiral, the energy readings are off the charts. These beings are drawing power from the planet itself, and from something else." "What else?" "Human belief. The more people who see them and believe in them, the stronger they become. It's like they're powered by faith itself." Jake understood. Across the world, every human who still had access to communications was watching the impossible battle unfold. Children who had grown up on stories of gods and heroes were seeing their myths come to life. Adults who had forgotten the old tales were remembering them as they watched lightning gods fight alien invaders. "The Velthran don't know what they're dealing with," Jake said. "Their whole empire is built on logic and technology. They can't fight something that runs on imagination." But the alien commander was learning fast. The prime subjugator's voice boomed across all frequencies as it rallied its forces. "These are illusions," it declared. "Tricks of light and energy. Focus fire on the human settlements. Destroy the source of their power." The strategy was smart, but came too late. As Velthran ships turned their weapons toward human cities, the mythological beings moved to protect them. A figure that looked like it was carved from jade and covered in brilliant feathers spread its wings over Mexico City. Enemy fire struck an invisible barrier and scattered harmlessly in all directions. In London, a warrior in bronze armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid raised a shield the size of a building. Plasma beams that could have leveled city. Blocks bounced off it like raindrops. The battle was turning into a rout. Velthran ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were falling from the sky in flames. Their ground forces were being turned into gardens or struck down by lightning that came from nowhere. But Jake could see that the mythological beings were paying a price for their power. Some of them were starting to look less solid, more like shadows than real figures. The energy required to manifest in the physical world was enormous, even for gods. "How long can they keep this up?" he asked Dr. Bennett. "I don't know," she admitted. "But Admiral, there's something else. The aliens aren't just randomly attacking different sites, they're targeting the places where the energy is strongest. If they can destroy enough of the ancient locations, they might be able to cut off the power feeding the Guardians." Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. The gods of humanity's past were winning the battle, but wars weren't won by single battles. The Velthran were adapting, learning how to fight an enemy unlike anything in their experience. The real test was still coming. The battle had been raging for 3 hours when Dr. Lisa Bennett made the discovery that changed everything. Deep in the underground chambers, she stared at a wall of symbols that told the complete story of humanity's forgotten past. "Dan, Amy, you need to see this," she called to her teammates. Her voice shook with excitement and fear. Professor Dan Carter looked up from the crystal formations he had been studying. "What did you find?" Lisa pointed to a section of the wall where new symbols had appeared. The ancient writing glowed brighter than before, as if the ongoing battle above was feeding power into the chamber. "Humans aren't from Earth," she said quietly. "We never were." Amy Rodriguez stopped calibrating her instruments and stared at Lisa. "What do you mean?" "According to this, our ancestors came here thousands of years ago. They were running from something. The same thing that's attacking us now." Dan moved closer to read the symbols himself. His face grew pale as he translated the ancient text. "The Vilthran Empire. They've been hunting humans across the galaxy for millennia. Earth wasn't our birthplace. It was our hiding place." Lisa continued reading. "When the first humans arrived here, they were sick and dying. Their ships were falling apart. They had maybe a few hundred people left from what used to be a civilization of billions. And the Guardians helped them," Amy said, understanding where the story was going. "More than helped," Lisa said. "The beings that were already here, the entities that had grown up with the planet itself, made a deal. They would protect the humans and help them hide from their enemies. In exchange, the humans would remember them, tell stories about them, keep their memory alive through songs and myths and legends. Above them, the fortress shook as another explosion rocked the city. But down in the chamber, the three scientists were uncovering truths that explained everything humanity had never understood about itself." Dan touched another symbol and read the words that appeared. "The Guardians are not gods in the way humans think of gods. They are the dreams and imagination of the Earth itself given form. They exist because planets can think in their own way. Earth chose to help the human refugees. But there was a price," Lisa continued. "The Guardians could only stay strong as long as humans believed in them, as long as children grew up hearing stories about thunder gods and wisdom goddesses and heroes who could move mountains." Amy checked her instruments. The energy readings from around the planet were fluctuating wildly. "Some of the manifestations are getting weaker, the ones in areas where fewer people are watching." Lisa understood what was happening. As humans became more scientific and stopped believing in myths, the Guardians got weaker. They had to sleep to conserve their strength, but they never forgot their promise. Meanwhile, in the Fortress Command Center, Admiral Jake Morrison was learning the same harsh truth from a different angle. The mythological beings that had seemed so powerful were starting to fade. "Sir, we're getting reports from around the world," Captain Ryan Torres said. "The manifestations are becoming less solid. Some of them are flickering like bad holograms." Jake watched the tactical display with growing concern. The Golden Warrior over Greece was still fighting, but his spear throws were slower now. The Thunder God in Norway had stopped summoning lightning and was using his hammer like an ordinary weapon. Even that was taking visible effort. "What's happening to them?" he asked. Dr. Bennett's voice crackled through the communicator from the underground. "Chamber, Admiral, we've learned something important. The Guardians draw their power from human belief. The more people who believe in them, the stronger they are. But belief isn't just about watching them fight." "What do you mean?" "People need to actively choose to believe, to have faith, to remember the old stories and feel them in their hearts. Just seeing something impossible isn't enough. You have to accept it as real and meaningful." Jake looked around the command center. His officers were staring at the screens with amazement, but he could see doubt in their eyes. They were trained military personnel who dealt in facts and logic. Watching gods fight aliens was incredible, but part of their minds was trying to explain it away as advanced technology or mass hallucination. "How do we make people believe?" he asked. "Tell them the truth," Lisa said. "All of it. The real history of humanity. Why we're here. What the Guardians have sacrificed to protect us. Make them understand that these aren't just pretty light shows. These beings are dying to save us." Jake made a decision that went against every military protocol he knew. He opened a communication channel to every human settlement on Earth and in the colonies. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force," he began. "I'm about to tell you something that will sound impossible, but your lives depend on believing it." He told them everything. About the ancient chambers beneath the city, about humanity's true origin as refugees from across the galaxy, about the Guardians who had been protecting Earth for thousands of years, powered by nothing more than human faith and imagination. The beings you're seeing fight for us aren't weapons or technology, Jake said. They're the gods and heroes from our oldest stories, and they're real. They've always been real. But they're dying because we stopped believing in them. The effect was immediate. Around the world, the fading manifestations began to solidify again. The thunder god's hammer blazed with fresh lightning. The golden warrior's spear burned brighter than the sun, but the Vaelthrin had been listening too. The prime subjugator's voice cut across all communication channels. Fascinating, the alien commander said. The humans draw power from delusion, from primitive superstition. This explains much about your species' irrational behavior. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. There's nothing primitive about hope, nothing irrational about protecting what you love. Sentiment, the alien replied. Weakness. We will demonstrate the superiority of pure logic. The Vaelthrin fleet began targeting civilian areas specifically, not military installations or the ancient sites where the Guardians drew their power, but schools and hospitals and homes, places where people lived and hoped and told stories to their children. The strategy was cruel but effective. Every human, death weakened the Guardians a little more. Fear and despair were the opposite of faith and imagination. Major Karen Lewis, coordinating ground defenses in the ruined city, watched her soldiers fall back as Vaelthrin bio-creatures pushed deeper into the residential districts. Admiral, we can't protect everyone. There are too many civilians and not enough of us. But something unexpected was happening. The civilians weren't just running and hiding. Families gathered in basements and bomb shelters were telling their children the old stories. Parents who hadn't thought about mythology in decades were remembering tales their own grandparents had told them. In one shelter beneath a collapsed school, an elderly woman named Betty spoke to 30 frightened children about a Norse god who fought giants with a magic hammer. As she talked, the children's eyes grew wide with wonder instead of fear. 3 blocks away, the thunder god felt new strength flow through him. His next hammer blow cracked the earth for miles around and sent a dozen alien biotanks flying through. The Air Captain Steve Murphy, leading air support operations, noticed something else. Sir, the Guardians are adapting, learning. They're using tactics now instead of just raw power. He was right. The beings of myth and legend were working together in ways that showed intelligence and strategy. Water spirits created fog to hide. Lightning strikes. Wind gods carried fire spirits over enemy lines to attack from unexpected angles. The Vaelthrin had superior technology, but the Guardians had something else. They had imagination. They could think of solutions that pure logic would never consider. The tide of battle was turning again, but both sides knew this was far from over. The real test would come when the alien commander decided to stop playing games and commit everything to wiping humanity from existence. The change began when 8-year-old Tommy Chen stood up in a crowded shelter beneath the ruins of New Geneva. His parents tried to pull him back down, but the boy shook his head and walked to the center of the room where 50 other people huddled, in fear. My grandma used to tell me stories, Tommy said in a clear voice that somehow carried over the sound of explosions above. About brave heroes who protected people from monsters. She said if you believe hard enough, the heroes will come, help you. An older man in the corner laughed bitterly. Kid, those are just fairy tales, this is real life. Tommy looked at him with the serious expression that only children can have. The Thunder God is real. I saw him on the news. So maybe all the stories are real. He closed his eyes and began to speak about heroes he had heard about in bedtime. Stories, knights who fought dragons, wise women who could heal any wound, warriors who never gave up no matter how scared they were. Something amazing happened as Tommy talked. The other people in the shelter began to feel different, braver, more hopeful. And far above them, the Guardians fighting in the sky felt new, power flowing into them like water into a dry well. This scene was happening all over the world. In bomb shelters and refugee camps and military bunkers, humans were remembering what it meant to believe in something bigger than themselves. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Turner noticed the change first on his instruments. Admiral, the energy readings from the Guardian manifestations are spiking everywhere. but it's not coming from the ancient sites anymore. Where is it coming from? Admiral Jake Morrison asked. Everywhere, Alex said with wonder in his voice. Every place where people are, gathered together. Every shelter, every safe house, every group of survivors. The power is coming from the people themselves. Jake understood. The Guardians had always drawn their strength from human belief, but something had changed. Instead of just remembering old stories, people were creating new ones. They were choosing to believe not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "Sir, we're getting reports from all over the city," Captain Ryan Torres said. "Something's happening to our equipment. And our people." Jake looked around the command center and saw what Ryan meant. The screens and computers were glowing with the same soft light that came from the ancient symbols underground. But more importantly, the people were changing too. Sergeant Nicole Price looked at her hands in amazement. Her standard military rifle was changing, becoming something that looked like it belonged in a fantasy story. The metal gleamed like silver, and symbols appeared along the barrel that seemed to pulse with their own light. "My weapon feels different," she said. "Lighter, but also more powerful." Captain Steve Murphy checked his fighter pilot gear and found similar changes. His helmet display now showed things that shouldn't have been possible. He could see the life force of every person in the city below. More importantly, he could see the fear leaving them as hope took its place. "The line between science and magic is disappearing," Dr. Amy Rodriguez reported from the underground chamber. "Our instruments are detecting quantum effects that match the energy signatures of the Guardians. It's like reality itself is becoming more flexible." Dr. Lisa Bennett looked up from the ancient symbols she had been studying. "The texts are changing again. New words are appearing. They say the compact is evolving. Instead of just protection in exchange for remembrance, it's becoming something else. A true partnership." "Between humans and the Guardians?" Jake asked. "Between humans and the universe itself," Lisa said. "The Guardians were just the beginning. They were Earth's way of teaching us that belief and imagination have real power. Now that we understand that, we can do things we never dreamed of." Above the city, the battle was reaching its peak. The Valthrin Prime Subjugator had finally committed everything to destroying humanity. The alien commander's massive personal ship, a biomechanical nightmare the size of a mountain, descended toward Earth like a falling moon. "All forces converge on the human stronghold," the Prime Subjugator commanded. "End this farce. Show these primitives what happens when inferior species resist their betters." But as the alien forces gathered for their final assault, they faced something they had never encountered before. The Guardians were no longer fighting alone. The Thunder God raised his hammer, but now a dozen human pilots flew alongside him. Their aircraft moved through the air like living things, powered by engines that ran on pure will instead of fuel. When they fired their weapons, bolts of lightning shot out instead of ordinary missiles. The Golden Warrior cast his spear, but this time it multiplied in flight. What started as one weapon became 100, then 1,000, each one guided by the hopes and dreams of a different human child who believed that heroes always won in the end. The Prime Subjugator's ship fired its main weapon, a beam of energy that could crack planets. The blast struck the combined forces of Guardians and humans directly. Nothing happened. The energy beam struck a barrier made of pure faith and scattered like light through a prism. Every person on Earth who believed in protection, in justice, in the idea that good could triumph over evil, had contributed to that shield. "Impossible," the alien commander hissed. "Matter and energy follow laws. They cannot be changed by mere thought." "You're wrong," Jake Morrison said, speaking into his communicator for all the world to hear. "Thoughts change everything. Ideas shape reality. And the idea that refuses to die is that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they work together." As he spoke, the fortress around him transformed. The military base became something between a medieval castle and a starship from the future. Ancient stones grew alongside gleaming metal. Weapons that fired both bullets and magic stood ready on the walls. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans and Guardians fought side by side, their powers mixing and strengthening each other. Technology enhanced by imagination proved stronger than pure logic. Courage backed by ancient wisdom defeated overwhelming force. The Prime Subjugator's ship began to crack under the assault. For the first time in its long life, the alien commander felt something it had never experienced before. Doubt. How? It asked, as its vessel fell from the sky. How can belief defeat fact? Because, Jake answered, facts are just beliefs that everyone agrees on, and we choose to believe in something better. The Velthran fleet retreated into space, carrying news of their impossible defeat back to their empire. Behind them, they left a changed world. Earth was no longer just a planet where humans lived. It had become something new. A place where the old stories were true because people chose to make them true, where science and magic worked together instead of fighting each other. The Guardians didn't fade away this time. Instead, they changed, becoming partners rather than protectors. The Thunder God became a teacher, showing humans how to command lightning. The wisdom goddesses shared their knowledge freely. The heroes of old trained new heroes for the challenges ahead. In the underground chamber, Dr. Bennett read the final symbols that appeared on the ancient walls. The compact is complete, she said. Humanity has learned the first lesson. The universe is bigger and stranger than we thought, and we are stronger and more important than we knew. Jake Morrison stood at the window of his transformed fortress and looked up at the stars. The Velthran would return someday, probably with more ships and better weapons. But they would find humanity ready for them, more than ready. They would find a species that had learned to dream with their eyes open, a people who knew that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or biology or physics, it was hope. And hope, once awakened, was impossible to defeat. The age of purely scientific thinking was ending. The era of mythological reality had begun, and humanity's greatest adventures were just starting.